Hi everybody and welcome to this video on Language Paper 2 Section A Question 4. That is not a short title. Remember that this series is suitable for people who are doing AQA GCSE English Language. If you're doing a different qualification, this video is not for you. But if it is for you, if you're doing that spec, then plunge right in. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'd advise you to head over to my blog, amysmithliterature.wordpress.com, and go to the relevant page on that so that you can see all the sources. I've got everything typed up there as well. So the question that we're looking at today is compare how the writers convey their similar feelings and perspectives about the employment of children during the Victorian period. So that's the main bit of the question, but we're going to read the whole thing and we're going to break it down so you can understand what it's asking you to do. So the first bit says, for this question, you need to refer to the whole of source A together with the whole of source B. Now, for this example, I've chosen two quite short extracts. In the exam, the extracts will be a bit longer, so you need to make sure that you've read them carefully and you've digested them as you've been doing questions 1, 2 and 3, because actually there's quite a lot to get your head right here. Then it says compare. So compare is showing links between the sources. So look at the question carefully to see if it's similarities or differences, but essentially we're trying to link those sources together. It says compare how. Now how, sorry, my English accent, how tells us that the examiner wants you to analyse the language. So what methods, what words, what language devices have the writers chosen and why have they chosen to use that? Then it says, compare how the writers convey their similar feelings and perspectives. Now, the question could say similar, could say different. Just be careful that you read it carefully. If you write about the wrong thing, you'll sacrifice a lot of your marks. We'll talk about perspectives in a little bit more detail in a moment. Then it tells us the topic of the question, so the employment of children during the Victorian period. So that's the theme of the two extracts I've picked for today. Now, there's 16 marks for this question, so in an ideal world, you'd write 2 paragraphs about each source. I would suggest that you alternate them. So 1 paragraph about source A, 1 paragraph about source B, 1 about source A, 1 about source B. If you're stuck for time, however, I would suggest that you do 2 really good paragraphs instead of 4 really rushed ones. You want to make sure you put plenty of time into your analysis because that's where the marks are for this question. Now, I said we'd come back to the words, feelings and perspectives and break that down a little bit more. I've got a diagram on the screen here that shows you the kind of language you should be using to talk about feelings and perspectives. So if we break it down into simple terms, feelings and perspectives can be positive or they can be negative. So the example I always use is my feeling about animals. I've got very negative feelings about dogs. Sorry, everybody. However, I've got really positive feelings about cats. Now, if we break that down a little bit more, I have negative feelings about dogs because I get frustrated. They're always licking my jeans and I've just washed them, and then I've got dog hair and whatever on my jeans, or they're putting their face into my food, or they're, running away in the lead or whatever. They really, really frustrate me. So my feelings are negative. I'm not furious with dogs, though that would be a bit extreme. I'm just a bit frustrated with them. So you can see that I've given a more nuanced, a more precise explanation, whereas my feelings about cats are really positive. Now, if I want to be more precise about that, I'm not going to say that I'm passionate about cats. I'm not a cat ambassador. I would probably say that, I find cats quite interesting. I like the way they're independent. I probably would say I'm enthusiastic about cats. If there's a cat around, I'd be stroking it, that kind of thing. But I'm not passionate. I'm not, I don't actually have one. So you can see that as I'm breaking down and explaining in a little bit more detail, I'm using the terms on the screen to give that really precise explanation of what my perspective is. Now let's start applying this to a question. So here's source A. As I said, if you go to my blog, you can see this source on there, amysmithliterature.wordpress.com. Click on English Language Paper 2 and then go to question 4 and you'll see this there. So source A is from a report from 1842. It's entitled Children in the Coal Mines, and it's a non-fiction source, so it's a real source. Let's read it. From the whole of the evidence which has been collected, and of which we have thus endeavoured to give a digest, we find in regard to coal mines, 1. That instances occur in which children are taken into these mines to work as early as 4 years of age, sometimes at 5 and between 5 and 6, not unfrequently between 6 and 7, and often from 7 to 8, while from 8 to 9 is the ordinary age at which employment in these mines commences. 2. That a very large proportion of the persons employed in carrying out the work of these mines is under 13 years of age, and a still larger proportion between 13 and 18. 3. That in several districts female children begin to work in these mines at the same early ages as the males. Then I've skipped a little bit. 8. That although this employment scarcely deserves the name of labour, yet as the children engaged in it are commonly excluded from light and are always without companions, it would, were it not for the passing and repassing of the coal carriages, amount to solitary confinement of the worst order. Now, I've taught for a long time, so I know you're going to be tempted to not follow this instruction, but I'm asking you to do this. Pause the video and reread the source on your own. And then look at the diagram of my positive and negative words and decide which words apply most to the source we've just read. When you've done those two things, start the video again. Right, let's have a look at source B then. We're going to read it again and then look at the vocabulary again. So source B is from the Condition of the Working Class in England. It's by Friedrich Engels from 1844. It's about the same time period as the other source. So let's read. Moreover, a mass of children work the whole week through in mills or at home, and therefore cannot attend school. Evening schools, supposed to be attended by children who are employed during the day, are almost abandoned or attended without benefit. It is asking too much that young workers who have been using themselves up 12 hours in the day should go to school from 8 to 10 at night. And those who try it usually fall asleep, as is testified by hundreds of witnesses in the Children's Employments Commission report. In a glass factory which employs children, many of the children are pale, have red eyes, often blind for weeks at a time, suffer from violent nausea, vomiting, coughs, cold, and rheumatism. When the glass is withdrawn from the fire, the children must often go into such heat that the boards on which they stand catch fire under their feet. Okay, again, don't ignore this instruction. Read the text again, look at the arrow, decide which words apply to the text, and then start the video again. Right, now what we're going to do is start planning our answer. So exactly the same as we did for question 2, we would want to make a table. You can sketch this quickly on your exam paper. 1 column for source A, 1 column for source B. And you can see that I've started to fill it in already. So in source A, I've picked a word from my arrow, critical. So that's my negative word. And I said the children are too young to work, and that's in point 1 in source A. And then for source B, I've picked another word from my arrow, which is furious, linking it to paragraph 2 of source B and saying that the children are suffering physically due to work. Okay, your job again now, pause the video and try and fill in the rest of the table. So go back to the sources, reread them, choose a word from the arrow, and then think how could the source link to that word that you've chosen, and then start the video again. Right, here is one that I have completely filled in then. So source A, I've got critical, passionate, and furious. Source B, I've got furious, critical, and compassionate. The question's asking me to compare the similar feelings and perspectives. So now I've highlighted them to show which ones match. And I can see that for source A and source B, I've got the word critical. And for source A and source B, I've got the word furious. So that is what I would base my paragraph on. Right, let's think about the next thing we've got to do for this question, which is analyse the language. We've thought about the feelings and perspectives. Now we need to think about how the writers have used vocabulary, language devices, literary methods to communicate their ideas. On the screen, you can see that I've highlighted the sections that have jumped out at me the most. So first of all, I've highlighted 4 years of age. That's using a statistic to emphasise just how young these children are. I mean, imagine a 4-year-old going out and doing a full day of work, day after day, independently. Point 2, I've highlighted that because I'd liked the way they're using quite scientific, quite unemotional language to explain the ideas, and that gives it a real sense of authority, of confidence. You know, this is not a writer who's getting carried away by the emotional side of this. This is someone who's laying out the facts to convince their reader. And then in point 8, I've looked at the idea of not having light. So these children don't have access to light, and light in literature is always to do with hope, happiness, growth, life, and these children are taken away from that. And then the phrase solitary confinement. Now, that's when you're locked up on your own. So it's talking about the really extreme, almost punishment that these children are facing. Okay, looking at source B quickly then, the first thing I've highlighted is a mass of children. So this is not just 1 or 2 children who are working in these conditions, but thousands and hundreds of thousands of children who are having to submit to this. Then I've highlighted 12 hours a day, as again we use statistics here to emphasize just how serious the situation is. And then I've highlighted my list at the end. So pale, red eyes, blind, nausea, vomiting, etc., etc. Now that big list, well, Engels could have just said the children are sick because of the work, but he doesn't. He lists all the different medical conditions they have. And that's to emphasize just how awful the suffering is that they have gone through. Okay, your turn again. Now you're going to write a paragraph, firstly based on source A, and I've got that information on the screen there in front of you. And I've put in orange down the side the ideas that I've got that you could write about. And then in the black box, I've given you some instructions for how to write your paragraph. Okay, if your teacher's told you to do something different, follow their instructions, but this is what I teach my classes. So write up your paragraph, then start the video again when you're ready. Okay, so moving on to the last bit of this video then, thinking about how we could write up source B. So it's exactly the same kind of thing. I've taken out the section of the text that I want us to focus on. In orange down the side, I have put my suggestions for what you could write. And in the black box, I've put my sentence starters and my suggestions for how you could do this. Okay, so thank you very much for watching, everyone. Remember, if you've not checked out the resources on the website, to go over and do that, because it's much easier to access these videos on there with all of the information on them. And I hope you check out the rest of the playlist.